Oh, hello, everybody. Happy to have you on this Wednesday afternoon. My name is Gina Cabadoo. I use she, her pronouns, and I get the opportunity to be a program coordinator with Kids Mental Health Pierce County. Our fabulous facilitator of these webinars, as usual, is Vanessa Adams. She is out doing some community work, so I'm covering for her today. I am just as excited to tee up our good friends over at Bridges to talk about some great content today. I'm going to be running some technical pieces on the back end of keeping an eye on the Q&A, which you're welcome to use to ask questions. Please ask your questions as they come up. Our team here is going to be keeping an eye on that, responding live, both through the chat and also live, just through our discussion format. So we appreciate those questions and we do welcome them. For those of you who aren't familiar with Kids Mental Health Pierce County, we are a community coalition of 70 plus providers and organizations around the community that are working together to support primarily kindergarten through 12th grade youth. And we really want to look at that entire spectrum of behavioral health, bringing the community into the care continuum. So with that, I'm excited to spotlight some of our good friends that are doing the good work. And Lisa, I'm going to kick it over to you and your team. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks, Gina. So if you would share go ahead and share the slides, that'd be great. So thank you for being here. We're going to talk today about children's grief interventions, and I will do some of the sharing on this topic from the perspective of being the program coordinator at Bridges Center for Grieving Children, but I have 4 of my facilitators who will be joining us at different sections to talk about some of the interventions that they have provided. So Bridges Center for Grieving Children is a center that we support children who are grieving from the ages of 4 to 18 and the adults in their life. We are a community program, part of Mary Bridge Children's Hospital. Go ahead, next slide. So we'll be talking today, as I said, about children's grief interventions. We started this webinar series with a lunch and learn, and then we went into children's grief overview. And the second full webinar was grief across development. Today, the grief interventions. And then the fourth webinar, we will be talking about empowering adults and supporting grieving children. All of them are recorded, so you can go back and view them and take the information in again, if that would be helpful, and share it with others. So Bridges has been around for 35 years, and we have been doing support groups for those 35 years. And we have served over 10,000 children and adults in our program, and over 5,000, about closer to 6,000 families in those 35 years. Go ahead, next slide. So why we look at grief in children. Grief can disrupt development in the short term and the long term for children and teens. And of course, those areas that it can impact them are academically, socially, emotionally. And so it's important that we look at how we can help children connect to their grief experience and share that experience. So in the next slide, this slide here, this just really gives us a little glimpse, and I would say it's a big overview, I guess, is really what it is. So in Washington State, the census for Washington State in 2023 is that of the children living in Washington State, they estimate 1,604,705 children under the age of 18 in 2023. So there's research done out of Judy's house in the CBAM model that looks at, first by state, how many children under 18 in that state, potentially the estimation of how many children will experience the death of a parent or a sibling. So if we look at the census and the number of children and teens that there are in Washington State, that 1 in 16 number for Washington State in the estimation model puts us over 100,000 youth in Washington potentially will experience the death of a parent or sibling by the age of 18. And the reason I put this in all of the webinars is just kind of to lay that groundwork of why we talk about this, why we really want to look at how Bridges, of course, cannot serve all these kids. None of us individually can do much, but collectively we can do a lot. And so that's why we are looking at children's grief. So in the next slide, why play? So interventions are really partly about play for kids. And a child wants to play, but really a child needs to play. It is how they understand themselves, understand others, make connection with others, and connection with the world that they live in. Next slide. So through play, we hope, and through these interventions, we hope that it can address a child's sense of isolation, child's fears that they are dealing with that impact their daily life, a sense of low self-esteem, that through this play and through this connection, we're hoping that these areas will decrease. And in a group setting, the interactive play activities can increase the social development, increase a child's capacity for empathy and respect of others, and as well as understanding their own feelings. And facilitators find that they need to shift the activities to fit the range of the reading and writing ability. We've heard a lot about that since the pandemic, and we are really seeing that in our program, that some of the activities that we do at Bridges, we're really trying to avoid activities that are heavy on writing or reading, so that all of the children in the group can really have a sense of being able to engage in the activity. Go ahead and the next slide. So the Center of Loss and Bereavement looks at exactly that, bereavement. And what they are talking about here is that a child given the opportunity to play, intentional activity around their grief, it can potentially provide a space for them to process their fear, to express love or feelings of connection, to address anxiety, their memories, and their deep sense of loss. And that may look different, of course, at different ages. So if you go back, just stay with the openers. Thanks, Gina. That with teens, it may look really different, but it's still play. It's still about that connection. So openers are something that we do at Bridges to help warm up to the idea of talking about some of their most difficult experiences in life and their grief. In a group setting, it can give the group members a chance to find connection and learn about others in the group. In an individual setting, it can again be that warm up, that gradual progression into the more difficult content. So next slide, we have a question ball, and it can be absolutely any ball. And what we have found is that the ball can either have a number on it, and that corresponds to a list of questions, or it can actually have the questions written out on tape and just taped onto the ball. And then the one who receives the ball answers that question that their thumb lands on, or chooses a question that they want to answer from the ball. And what we found is that, one, it encourages participation across a group. It encourages, it's inviting for someone to engage in the activity if they receive the ball, and then they have a choice what they're open to answering. The questions can go from light to serious. It could stay, if the intention is to really stay light, then leaving them all light, or a combination. And then again, the individual has the choice. So this is just some examples that we've put on a question ball that can be inviting and engaging for children and youth. Another one that we'd see in the next slide. So if you go back one, there you go. Would you rather? This is a great activity that we play a lot at Bridges, and it is a way to, again, it can stay really light, or it can dip into more serious content. So would you rather? And I'm going to ask, as you can probably tell by the pictures on the slide, I'm going to ask you all to put in the chat, would you rather be as strong as a gorilla or as fast as a cheetah? And go ahead and put your response in the chat. Oh, we got a few gorillas. It's a tie. Oh yeah, it looks pretty darn even. Some want to be strong, others want to be fast. I personally would love to be fast. That looks amazing to be able to run like a cheetah. That's great. So super simple, gives a chance to just show up and say, yeah, this is what I would prefer, and kind of begin that sense of connection. And the next slide shows us another one that we use a lot at Bridges, and that is penny for your thoughts. So how this works is that everyone has a stack of pennies, and there's a jar in the middle, or either between the 2 or 3 people or the larger group in the middle. And then there are statements that are read out. And if the individuals really resonate with that statement, then they put a penny in the middle. So on the next slide is one example of how we've used that. And that is what feels real and unreal. Because we find so often, no matter the age, up through adults, the experience of a death can pretty universally feel really unreal at points in the person's experience of their grief. And so this is an example of how we've used penny for your thoughts. So I am scared of forgetting the person who died. Everyone who is afraid of that puts a penny in the jar. And what this does is it provides a chance for others to experience community in the sense that there's a connection there. Oh, you feel that way too, or you have had that experience too, without the individual having to put words to it, which can really help with the comfort level and the willingness to show up and the courage. I mean, it takes a lot of courage to begin to talk about this experience with a death in a person's life. And so this is an example of how someone can be invited, but not be hit with direct questions. And we find over and over when we first meet families at Bridges in what we call the intake, so often the child or teen is really, really reserved when they first come into that setting with the Bridges staff, and they know why they're there, and often are looking down or shaking their head like, this is not where I want to be. But with that reassurance that no one's going to ask them to talk about something that they don't want to talk about, that no one's going to ask them direct questions that they have to have responses for, if they don't want to. It often, in the 12 years I've been at Bridges, I have seen over and over that the children and teens often will warm up even by the end of the intake. But then we suggest they give it a try of 3 tries to be involved in the grief support, and find that after 3 tries, there can be a really different experience. Okay, next slide. So what we're going to do now is we're going to talk with my team here. We're going to share some different interventions that they've used with different ages, and they will share with you a description of it, the age that they used it with, and how it worked, how the kids responded. So we're going to organize this around our tasks of grieving, which we get from William Warden. And it's the foundation of the work that we do at Bridges with the grief work with the families. And so this is just a little bit review from our first webinar, but this is going to help us kind of keep within the framework of understanding, again, the tasks of grief. So the first one we're looking at is to accept the reality of the loss. So telling the story, the kind of the who, what, where, and how of the experience of the death in the family. So Derek is going to share with us And next slide, if you would. Derek is going to share with us how he used Play-Doh initially and then sock puppets with kids to get at their story. Thanks, Derek.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa.
And next slide, Gina, if you would.
Yeah, thanks. So Plato, when we talk about telling the story of the death, and especially as Lisa had mentioned earlier, we're trying to get a little bit away from heavy reading and writing and such. And this is a really good example of being able to use an activity to help kind of develop some language within the group or within the session with the children um, that you're with. So I'll usually use this kind of earlier on. Um, and oh, my age group I tend to work with is between 7 and 9. But this kind of works for a lot of kids between, I'd say, 5 up to 10. Um, even older people like playing with Play-Doh, turns out Play-Doh's fun. Um, but the way I kind of utilize this is we have the Play-Doh, and kids aren't developed, let's say, so much yet with abstract concepts and abstractions and the ideas of what death means and what death looks like. And so Plato, when the prompt generally is something like, use Plato however you like, but I'd like for you to whatever reminds you of what death is. I'll try to keep it very basic. Um, some kids like a little more guidance, some kids are fine with that. And as with, I mean, all activities across all children, uh, I always emphasize patience and imagination. What often happens is that you'll see something that's very unrelated. I had a kid who he saw Play-Doh, he's like, give me the red. I was like, here's the red. And he just started making pepperoni and he made a pepperoni, boom, put it on their stack, another pepperoni, boom. And I was like, okay, what's with the pepperoni? And he's like, pepperoni is my favorite food. I'm hungry. I'm like, okay. Um, uh, so I let it be for a little bit, right? Came back, just patient. Came back and started to ask, hey, so what does the pepperoni remind you of? And so this kid looked at me and said, well, pepperoni gets bad and you have to throw it away. Um, when pepperoni gets bad in the fridge, sometimes you gotta, throw it out. I was like, oh, why does that remind you of that? Well, it turns out that in their family, the person in their family that had died was sick for a long time. They had been decaying physically, and it was difficult to for that child to witness that process and to make that connection with just pepper. Of course, they were hungry; they liked pepperoni, right? But that was a connection they were making while they were making this pepperoni. And so Plato can kind of show up in all these different ways and help kind of develop some initial connections and language surrounding how death uh, how death is associated with them and how they conceptualize the world around them. Um, so yeah, Plato, use it early, have fun with it, be patient with it. Good. Next slide, please, Gina. And sock puppets. So sock puppets are really a fantastic tool for being able to narratively structure and tell the story of this person and their family and the death circumstance and how the child is experiencing that in their world. And so sock puppets, as you can see, they're fun. They got little yarn hair and googly eyes. And what often happens, and is so often the case, is the construction of these sock puppets is as important, if not maybe more so than the actual story itself, the being told, with the mouth. What I tend to see happen a lot, this is not a prompt generally. Often I'll just say, we're making these sock puppets. They can help us tell the stories of what happened in our family, the death that happened in our family. Um, and they can be comforting. Sometimes it's difficult to tell a story to people. Um, and these sock puppets can help serve as a way to have fun with and tell a story in a different way. And what tends to happen is these sock puppets, I see often, I'd say more than a dozen or 2 dozen times. These sock puppets will symbolize a child, a fictional child that the kid creates that just happens to have a very similar life story to the person making it, right? And so this sock puppet will develop a character on their own and start telling the story that happened to their family that's very, very similar to the circumstances that the child experienced. So what usually happens then after they've created this character, gave it a name, had fun with it, they'll have fun with it, ooh, and to tell jokes and my favorite food, spaghetti, what they're going to do. But then what starts to happen is when they start telling a story about the death that happened, they'll say, oh, Fred, some, fictional Frederick, their parents did this. And then what'll happen is they'll stop animating with the sock puppet and start telling the story directly. They'll still have the sock puppet up, right? But they'll start using more of an I voice instead of the sock puppet. They'll say, well, when it happened and the sirens, the lights were coming on and I was scared that, I didn't know that the person stopped breathing and et cetera, et cetera. And then the sock puppet will kind of come down. Serves as more of an intermediary there. And it's a wonderful tool uh, to get kids kind of bridge that gap between this concept of what happened and being able to actually tell it in a way that they're comfortable with whoever's administering this activity and with the people, the kids around them, the other people involved in the activity. It's and often what I've heard from kids is that they take these sock puppets home and they use them to they use them in their daily life as something that comforts them after that. Something to just have around and be able to talk to or tell stories through. It has kind of a long-term benefit that way. So yes, those are kind of two of the activities we use pretty often with young kids, especially 7 to 9 kind of range. Um, and yeah, that's it for me. That's
Thanks, Derek. Great. Next slide, Gina. Task 2. So in this task, we're looking at working through the pain of the grief. And in the next slide, the way that we understand this is feeling the feelings. So Bridges breaks out in our focus in our program is we focus first on naming and claiming. So really helping children and youth exercise that naming, that putting words to and claiming what is their feeling, maybe very different than the other members of their family. And then we move into sharing and coping. Sharing those feelings with others is powerful. And then finding ways to cope. What's a meaningful way for that child, that family, that individual to cope with those feelings? So next slide. This is an example of H. Norman Wright created this image of a ball of grief, and it's a tangled ball of emotions. And this is a great representation of the complexity of feelings that are involved with the grief process. The model helps to normalize the full range of emotions and can lead to a discussion about the process of grief and how it's a journey that takes time to put words to. It takes time to feel movement within that journey. And if one were to try and unravel a ball like this, it wouldn't be done easily and quickly. It would take some time and work. So in the next slide, there's a drawing of an actual participant. And the way it's done is that a code is created, color code for different feelings. And then the participant is invited to color with that color as much as that feeling is standing out to them, how significant it is in their current experience. And to fill in the ball with as much color as it fits for those feelings. And then, of course, it's the sharing of the ball and the color. And if it's done in a setting with more than a few people, then the balls, of course, will look very different. And it can just in viewing others' ball of grief, tangled ball of grief, it can really represent what stands out for that individual without having to say a lot of words again. So it can be really helpful in that sharing piece of the feelings. So next slide. All right, Erin Carpenter is going to share with us how she has worked with kids with the feeling jar.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. So I've done this with both the littles and the middles, and so for me, that's kind of ages 4 and 5 all the way to about 10. And one thing that I really like about this activity right off the bat is it's one that's actually pretty familiar to a lot of our kids. That's been my experience at least, or maybe their teacher has one at school or a school counselor, but they've often seen something like this, and so there's already a little bit of familiarity. I mean, obviously not all kids, but a lot of the ones I've worked with have had that familiarity. And so really this is made with glitter glue. There's lots of different ways to do it, but the way we've done it at Bridges is warm water and glitter glue. And then we've had kids put other objects in the jar, like beads or little confetti pieces. And so sometimes they might name a bead as a certain feeling, or it might be a happy memory. So we did one group where kids had special heartbeats, and it was a memory that was they enjoyed that was special to them. Um, and so they spent some time going through the beads and the confetti, and picking out their what color glitter glue they want, and making the jar themselves. And then you screw on the lid and put some tape on the top so the contents don't fall out. But then we can spend a lot of time talking about what happens when you shake up the jar. Um, and so that's really when we get into what Lisa was talking about naming and claiming the feelings. And so are they mad or angry or confused or sad? But just that how our feelings can feel all mixed up. And then when everything is all mixed up, things are really hard to see. So then I've used it as a way to teach just a calming activity, right? A mindfulness activity that will also often walk kids through a breathing activity to help calm them down. And so they can just watch the glitter come down and watch things settle. And then we might do a check-in on how you felt after you did that activity. Another thing that we've done is really talked about when that is all shaken up, how confusing it is. And that when you allow your feelings to calm down, you might see or you might notice something else that was going on. So maybe I was feeling really, really angry. And I got mad at school and I threw something across the room. But what I really realized once my glitter settled is I was really sad because my parent couldn't go on the field trip with me, right? So we've used it to coach some feelings like that. So um, yeah, so again, just again, using it, one, to teach that emotional language of naming and claiming the feeling. And then two, we've used it to really teach and model a coping skill so that you can feel better in those moments. And then, the kids have so much fun with it. They shake it up and they're often just really excited to show their siblings or families that might be in the program. And then another couple of variations that we have done in one of the groups. We use more like mason jars or like recycled jam jars is another way that we've done it. And so we've spent some time also decorating the tops of the lids. And so some kids drew pictures of a memory. Some kids maybe put the initials or the name of the person who died on the top of the lid. So again, lots of little ways that you can modify it. And then the last thing I'll say that I've done is I've often paired this with stories. Bridges has a wide collection of many different books. So a lot of times we've read a feeling book or some sort of book about naming your feelings, and then transition into the feeling jar activity. And that's provided really nice scaffolding to have some of those conversations. And
That's
then
great. Sorry, Erin, I didn't mean to cut you off. That's great. What a great reminder of the book and how helpful that is. So the stress balls, just real quick, it's just an example. These are stress balls kids have made in bridges, and this is getting at the coping as well. And it's just a sock filled with rice closed up with a rubber band, and then they decorate any way they want and add that creativity and aspects either about themselves or the person they're remembering, and then they can use those balls as a comfort item and just reminding them to find ways to release difficult feelings. So next slide. So the third task is to adjust to an environment in which the deceased is missing. And in this, with next slide, we will just have one activity for this, and this is just a circle of support. So super simple, piece of paper, circles drawn on it, and the child or teen can talk about who's in their inner circle, who's maybe in that middle range, and who's in their outer circle, helping them to put words to adjusting to life now without the person in it, in their life. The next slide. So task 4, finding an enduring connection with the person who's died while moving on in life. And so in this one, we are looking at how we can look ahead and how we can deal with daily life. So in the next slide, great, Jess Williams is going to share with us an activity that was developed through her work with kids called One More Day.
Hi, everybody. This One More Day activity actually came about very organically. I started out for our memorialization topic um, with an activity that was just called Memorial Day, where the goal was for our kids to plan activities that they would want to do if they were going to plan a day to memorialize their person. One day filled with activities to help them remember the person that died. Um, and so it was kind of just in a worksheet format, and they looked at it. And these are 9 to 12-year-olds. And as they were starting to think about these questions, we were reading them out loud to the kids. They sort of all decided that they didn't want to think about how they would remember their person. They wanted to think about what they would do if they had one more day, um, what they would do if they could still spend time with that person. And so it really was an activity of their own creation that then they took on, and there were great conversations that came out of it. They talked about events that they wish that their person could still be present for, things that haven't happened yet that they're sad that their parent or their sibling is going to miss, um, things that have happened since their family member died that they wish they had been there for. um, they were talking about things like basketball games that they won and how great it would have been if dad could have been there to see me win that basketball game. um, Talking about, someday I might get married and I wish my dad could be there. um, or even just one more day spending time together with my person doing things that we love to do. In particular, one kiddo was talking about snow days with her sister and how much they love to go play in the snow together. And she wished she could have one more snow day with her sister. Um, Another kiddo was talking about he lost his grandma and said if he could have one more day with grandma, he would take her to watch a fireworks show and they would eat oatmeal together. They were just talking about things that their person who they lost would enjoy doing, and how much they would enjoy spending that time with them and making new memories and treasuring that time while they had it together, maybe in ways that they didn't while that person was alive. Um, it was really cool to watch them sort of unfold this activity together and talk about it and why they would choose the things to do that they would choose. A lot of them drew pictures instead of writing their answers. So it's definitely an activity that can be used for lots of different age groups. It has very minimal. I created like a comic strip kind of activity sheet, so it's pretty easy to just read the prompts out loud, and then they can write or draw their answers on it. Yeah. So some of the questions that I would ask them beyond um, what's just on the activity sheet is why did you choose the activities, or the things that you put in your plan. Was it because your person would like them? Was it because they bring you comfort? Because you have special memories sharing them with your person, or because it's something you never got to do with them and you wish that you could. Um, so it was just really exciting to basically watch them take an activity that I had planned and take it a step further, and create something that was really meaningful for them. Um, and then the next activity that I wanted to talk about for memorialization that I also have done with the same age group, so 9 to 12-year-olds, is a watercolor wash activity. So again, we're talking about memorialization, which is kind of a tricky concept to explain to kids sometimes, but basically we're trying to help them understand it's the things we do to maintain a connection with the person who died and to help our memories stand out to us. So what we do with this activity is we have white paper and white crayons, um, and we ask them to write or draw uh, pictures or memories of their person, um, on the white paper with the white crayon. And then after they're done with that, you take the watercolor paint and paint over it. And the wax from the crayon will keep the paint from soaking into the white paper. And then you can see the white, what was drawn in the white. Um, so how it went doing this activity with kids, I've done this multiple times with kids from lots of different age groups, but most recently, I definitely observed some frustration. Kids get really irritated when you hand them white paper and white crayons and they start trying to draw and they're frustrated. They're like, I can't see it. I'm breaking crayons trying to see what I'm writing, what I'm drawing. It's not showing up no matter what I do. But they're trying to like write names of their person. They're trying to write words like I love you, I miss you. They're drawing pictures of things that their person liked, etc. And then when I told them, okay, now we're going to paint over your drawing, there was a lot of pushback. They're not sure they want to paint over what they just worked really hard to draw, and they already can't see it very well. So several of the kids were like, I'm not sure I want to put paint on this. I want to be able to see it. I already can't see it. Why would we paint over it? So it's kind of funny as they're looking at you like you're crazy, but you get them to try it. Um, and then they're surprised and they're excited as their drawings sort of pop out, um, and their memories and the things that they wrote and wanted to capture stand out more after they paint over it. Um, and once they understand what the process is and what the goal of the activity is, everybody immediately wants to make 4 or 5 more of these. And now that they understand, they're more intentional about it. Um, and so we had good conversation about how they felt going through that process, how it was hard to see how sort of their memories, their feelings um, were disappearing a little bit or fading into the background, and the things we did to make them stand out, and how they felt through that process, and just thinking about the other things that we do in life to help make our memories stand out, to help us stay connected, and some really good discussions and some really great fun artwork always comes out of it.
That's great, Jess. I think that's one of the fears, one of the many fears that we hear pretty regularly is that fear of losing the memories, losing that connection to the person. And
Absolutely.
this would be a great way to kind of talk about that a little bit too, and ways that they can hold on to those memories. Okay, next slide, So this is just an example of something really basic, but can be done on a piece of paper. And it's the idea of creating their own constellation. So filling in their favorite memories and the stars, and can be something for them to, a takeaway for them to hold on to what's meaningful to them in their memories. And then next slide, we're going to have Alex join us and talk to us about how her team used the mosaics in their group with teens.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi everyone, my name is Alex. I work with the teens at Bridges, so the 14 to 17 age range. And this activity is one that we did for the first time fairly recently. And it basically consisted of a collection of just plain white plates and some colored Sharpies, as you can kind of see in the photos. And in the group, we had passed out the plates and explained that this is truly a blank slate for them. They can use this plate as a demonstration for whatever they want to. It can be a recollection of memories. It can be something that they wish they had said. It could be something that they want to let go of. It can be something that they're struggling with. It can be pictures. It can be really anything that they feel like they would benefit from putting onto a tangible thing that they can hold. And then later, after the plates are fully decorated and they're happy with them, we put them in Ziploc bags and we go outside and we each took turns breaking them. So they would each break their plate on the ground, and it felt almost like ceremonial in a sense of respecting everybody's space and everyone's time to break it, because it truly is like it feels like a grand expression of grief in such a physical way, that we don't typically or like traditionally do at Bridges, in something that is so like um, almost like explicit in expression. So, and then after everyone walks around and breaks their plate, we bring them back inside. And as you can see, we can pick out pieces of the mosaic that they really resonate with, or maybe they like the way that it looks, or maybe it has a specific word or a fragment of a sentence or something that they resonate with and that they find that they want to keep. And so in these pictures here, these were made into coasters, and each group member had taken a piece of everyone else's plate and put it into their coasters. And I think it's also a really great way to carry, the other people who are with you at Bridges along with you, because it is a journey that you take with other people. And then in our group night that I did with the teens, we made one big cement garden stone. And so everybody picked out about 2 to 3 pieces, and we kind of, mosaiced it together and had one big collection of our pieces that we could see. And this really went over well with the kids, I think. It's something that brings up a lot of emotions just simply by like physically breaking the object that holds so much emotion and that holds um, something that is so heavy, and being able to break it and see it break and hear it break and watch other people do that as well with their plates it was very moving, and it was very impactful, and the kids did really like it. And yeah, it was great, and I think it really brought everybody together too, being able to see all of our pieces together in one, whether it be a coaster or a garden stone. So yeah, this was one of the activities that we did with our teens.
Thanks, Alex. That's really great. And I think it's true with all of these activities that first step of either writing or symbolizing the response, and then sharing that response with others, either verbally or in sharing the pieces of each other's plate with each other, can really strengthen that sense of the importance of the support, but the importance of sharing and the connection with themselves to their own experience with the grief. So one of the things that was brought up already by Erin, and all of our groups, almost all of our groups use books. And so these are just some of the books that we have found, particularly lately, some are classics that have been around a while, and others are fairly new to us, but just really have found really helpful for the Bridges participants to experience hearing the story. And what books can do, it's just a fabulous way to share grief, in that hearing another person's perspective on grief can connect that individual to their story, and also it may impact their decrease their sense of isolation, and also give them some awareness of their own experience, that they connect with that, or they don't. um, Always have a feeling book in here. There's so many feeling books, and sometimes that can be one of the most powerful directions to go with helping children and teens, because really ultimately we're hoping that they connect to what their experience is. And sometimes it doesn't have to be about grief in particular, but can really help them focus on feelings. What is going on for me? And even in teen groups, they will lean in often to hear a story. It can just be so powerful for them. So next slide. This is a review from our last webinar, but it's worth repeating again. And just in these interventions that we're doing, of course, our goal is that the children will connect to themselves, their grief experience, and share that when they are ready and comfortable to do that. So we always go with the child's lead with their story. I think one of the things Derek was saying earlier when we were talking about his slides is that sometimes the associations can be pretty abstract or hard to make that connection to their grief story, but that's okay. That's where the child is at, and that's telling us where they are, what their thoughts and what's coming up for them. We want to acknowledge the intensity of the feelings that they're experiencing, if it is an intense feeling. Often with teens, it can be helpful to share that feeling may not go away, but the intensity will come and go, likely for them. We encourage always open and honest conversation with children. We use clear words with them: death, died, dying. We want to affirm their feelings and their thoughts. So we cannot look at a thought or a feeling if we do not acknowledge it. And so we're really encouraging the kids to acknowledge what's coming up for them, using the person's name or title. So if it was their dad, saying your dad, can be helpful to children to, again, know that this person that they're talking to can be a safe person to talk about difficult content. And sometimes just using the person's name communicates that to the child. One, that you're clued in and you know who the person was that they lost. That can be really powerful for children. And that you're not afraid to use their name or their title. You're not afraid to talk about it. You're not trying to avoid it. You're not trying to push it away or hide it. That if they are wanting to talk about it, you are a person that is open and is listening and willing to hear and talk about their experience. And then always okay to not have an answer. We don't so much, the reality of grief is it's messy. It's not a straightforward path through the grief. And we don't have answers, of course, for other people's grief experience, but we can certainly come alongside children and teens and help them find the people who might have answers for them. And often it's the expression of a concern that can begin to help that child find some support that they need. Next slide. So what children need to tell, retell, and again, tell their story. So some of these interventions that we've talked about today are just tools to help children tell their story, connect to what their experience is, retell their story. Like Derek was saying with the sock puppets, they may go home and with any of these takeaways that these children or teens would take from an experience, these interventions, they can be a way for them to revisit their story and tell it again, which is what a child needs. Next slide. So some of the resources, Bridges, we have a website found at marybridge.org/bridges. And it's not through the multi-care website, it's through the marybridge.org. And that has some articles, some more aspects about our program. It has a video of families sharing their experience in our groups. And so there can be some helpful content there for families. Illuna is a wonderful resource for resources to the broader community of grieving people across the country. They do the Camp Aarons and Camp Mariposa, but they also have a wealth of tools on their website. Childhood bereavement estimation model, if someone is wanting to look at what different states are experiencing with the types of death and how many children within that state potentially may experience death by the age of 18. Coalition to Support Grieving Students is a great website that has resources specifically for students, for teachers, for helping students to be in school while they're experiencing the grief. Kids Mental Health Pierce County, as we've talked about, so many great webinars on Kids Mental Health Pierce County website. National Alliance for Children's Grief is another website that has some resources. It also can help families across the nation find grief resources for children in their community. There's a map that lists that. And then the National Child Traumatic Stress Network is just one of many that offers resources, again, to providers working with children and family. This one particularly with trauma. Next slide. So this is how you reach us. This is our phone number. What we ask, if families are interested in our particular program, that they call directly so that they will, one, connect with staff, and they can know that when the availability for groups will open up, when it will open up for them potentially to be involved in the groups, if that's what they want. They can call us. We receive calls often for family members just trying to figure out how to tell the child about the death, and talk through with a professional with their child's age and what may be some of the content that would be helpful for a child to know, and why it's important for children to know at very young ages about the death and details about the death. So we can work with families on those questions. We again encourage families call if they do want to be in our groups, because if they're calling, then they're more engaged, and we don't want a referral to fall through the cracks. If we're trying to call back and they're not quite engaged, they may not be aware of looking for that call from us. Email is always a good way to reach out to the Bridges staff. My email's there, and my staff, Matt Ledeen, and we can answer questions and respond or set up a time to talk with families over the phone if that's more helpful. For those who are participating today, if you would like a document with these activities included in just kind of compiled together, please reach out to me in my email, and I will be pulling them together to be able to send that off to providers to use in your practice and working with children, and we can make that available to you. Okay. Next slide is really just questions. It's blank, but it's open for any questions that anyone may have with any of the interventions or any of the content from this webinar.
Yeah, Lisa, this is Gina. Thank you so much for that presentation. There's one question that I'm seeing here of we often get outreach immediately following a death or traumatic event from a provider or school professional to ask about resources. Do you have any recommendations on timelines for starting these interventions after a death?
Well, so families can be referred to resources like Bridges right away. It's usually what we recommend with families that they go through, if they're going to have a memorial or some kind of celebration, that they go through that first. if there is a situation where there's a legal situation, if anyone in the family would need to testify after a death, we recommend that they go through that before there be any interventions. But other than that, as far as any of these tools could be used at any time, it's really it's individualized based on when the child or teen is expressing an interest in that support and when they feel ready to engage with it. And so um, that's what I would recommend for more on an individual basis, to offer it and then make it available and take their lead on when they feel ready to do that. As far as our group support program, a lot of times it's the adult in the family that will get the children or teens to the support groups. And again, we recommend they give it 3 tries, because a child may never really say in that situation that they want to go be with a larger group and talk about this most difficult experience. So usually it's the adult that really helps them get there, and then they can process how it's working for them or not in that process.
Awesome. Thanks, Lisa. And that was the only question I saw in the Q&A. I did see in the chat, however, that someone is very interested in getting the materials for their organization. So I'll make sure I connect you and them by email as soon as we get off of
Great.
this call.
Thanks, Gina.
Great. You are most welcome. All righty. If there's any other questions, go ahead and drop those in the chat. I know sometimes it takes a second to type those out or just kind of process those, especially with so much good content, but very deep content. And I'm going to keep an eye on the Q&A and the chat as well. But meanwhile, just in case things are processing or they're making their way to the chat or the Q&A, I just want to give a huge, huge shout out to our presenters today. Lisa, Alex, Aaron, Jessica, Derek, thank you so much for the work that you're doing, for sharing some really concrete materials today and some great education. And of course, for being accessible for follow-up and questions. Seeing that I don't have any questions coming through the Q&A or the webinar chat, I think we can end a couple more minutes early, and I just see lots of thank yous pouring on in here from the chat. So with that, we wish everybody a great day. Thank you on behalf of all of us at Kids Mental Health Pierce County and Bridges. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Thanks for joining.